Without consistent reporting, it's really hard to choose the lower impact option. This pushes sustainability from nice-to-have marketing into procurement power. If our customers require transparency, providers will respond.
Hello, and welcome to Environment Variables, brought to you by the Green Software Foundation. In each episode, we discuss the latest news and events surrounding green software. On our show, you can expect candid conversations with top experts in their field who have a passion for how to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of software.
Hello, and welcome to the Week in Green Software. As you know, I'm Valeria, and today we are digging into some open source tools and we are digging into some super interesting things. We'll be, of course, talking about AI and transparency, and especially we were talking about the fact that AI is actually making good things. AI is like forcing the industry to get serious about comparable workload level carbon data. So it's basically like forcing us to become better technicians in some ways. And joining me today is a familiar voice for the TWiGS podcast, Adi. Adi, how are you and what are you up to these days?
Valeria, it's really great to see you again. And this past week, I've been reading research papers on how we measure the operational and embodied carbon emissions for DRAM. DRAM it's fascinating to me. It's a mythical beast, and it practically controls your entire system's performance and energy efficiency. In fact, AI is actually bottlenecked by memory performance, which led us into the great memory shortage that everyone is talking about. And I hope we will cover more of this memory shortage in a future episode. But let's stop right there and let's get back on track. So today we're talking about AI and carbon and impact. So take it away, Valeria.
Yeah, great. And I think that we will, we can suggest a specific episode to talk about DRAMs, I think.
That will be fantastic.
Just a quick suggestion to our producer. But yeah, before we jump into the news of today, just a quick reminder, everything that we talk about during this episode is referenced in the show notes below. And so I think that we have to start. So let's jump in with the first news. The first news is actually related with the Green Software Foundation, which is giving us the opportunity to talk about environmental sustainability today. So basically, today we will be talking about three open source tools. These are super interesting tools that if you are like in the sustainability world for a long time, maybe you already know some of them. But today we will be talking about the SCI, so one of the most important tools and most important standards from the Green Software Foundation. We will be talking about the impact framework and also Carmen, which is not one other host for this podcast, is actually an open source tool. And so if you're not familiar with these tools, I will try to give you a short introduction, and then we will be talking about why these tools are actually super relevant for companies and for development teams. So,
I'm pretty excited
Adi,
to know what happens.
Yes. So the SCI is, as I was saying, is an international standard, and it is developed by the Green Software Foundation. If I remember correctly, if my mind is not tricking me, the SCI became an ISO standard in 2024, if I remember correctly.
You are exactly right.
For one time, my mind is not tricking and it's not playing tricks with me. So the SCI can be represented with an equation, and it's super hot. I don't know, every time I look at the equation, my mind is like, that's so beautiful, because it is super easy to read. So basically, the SCI is a score, and is a score that can represent your software in terms of how much energy it consumes, how much hardware emissions account for, and these numbers are calculated taking into consideration a functional units, which is
Yep.
basically that unit that represents how your software scales. So it can be, for example, a visit per page, or the usage of an API. So that unit that can actually represent how your software is scaling. And as I was saying, in the equation, we have energy, we have carbon intensity, and we also have the embedded carbon for the hardware, as well as the functional unit. Did I explain it as easy as I can, Adi?
I think you did a great job. I think I understood perfectly well. And also, I hope our audience members who are not familiar with the STI standard, it's very simple. And I think Valeria did a great job. If you have any questions anytime, you can always just look it up.
Yes. Then we have the second one. We have the impact framework. The impact framework is a newer tool rather than the SCI. And basically, the impact framework works with manifest files, which are YAML files, that basically describe how your software system is built, describes also the data sources that you are drawing from, and basically it tells you like all of the things that can represent actually all the observations that you have for your software. And so it's not just about a file that we are sharing. It's not just about numbers. It's basically about processes and all the assumptions that a development team has to make for their software, and also conversion factors. The impact framework, the manifest files from the impact framework are very, very easy to read as well. And I think that the impact framework is one of the things that can represent in an open source way the concept of transparency. Like I'm super attached to the concept of transparency. We've talked about this in many episodes.
I loved that discussion. Yes.
Yes, in the impact framework, since the first time that I heard about it, I was like, this is a very clear way to explain people how your software is working and all the assumptions that you did. And also, these manifest files can be shared between companies.
Yep.
So basically,
Exactly.
your manifest file can be an example for another company. And so we know that if a company has some examples to take inspiration from, it's actually easier rather than to start from scratch. So, yeah.
That is exactly
Are
right.
you okay, Adi? Are you with me?
Yes, I'm with you, yes.
Perfect. And so, from the impact framework, we come to Carmen, which, again, is not one of the hosts for this podcast. Is actually, a friend of us. Carmen is defined as a measurement engine that actually implements the impact framework across cloud infrastructure and Kubernetes clusters. And so this tool can actually really help large organizations implement the impact framework as well. So we have 3 super powerful tools, I think. Adi, what do
They're
you think
extremely
about
useful.
this? Yes.
Yep.
And so what I was thinking about when I was reading the article, and also one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, we have such great tools to use, to test, to play with even. But I think, and what I see is that companies, development teams still have difficulties in embracing and make sustainability as part of their day-to-day job. And so what do you think about this?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question. I often think about this, right? So the question in my mind is just slightly different, and that would be, what is the hardest part in getting SCI measurement adopted? How can we incentivize companies, incentivize engineering teams to adopt this more and more? And then if you actually try to drill down, there's a few decision points, right? There can be data plumbing, or let's say the organization of the data in the organization, or management buy-in, or even a leadership that focuses on sustainability numbers for practical decisions, right? So all of these aspects are important when we talk about increasing SCI adoption. Among these, I think management buy-in, or the acceptance of the leadership that sustainability is important, it's practical, it's useful, is the first step, because everything else is downstream from that decision. Once we have buy-in, the chain flows from top to down, and the government definitely helps in this, right? So the CSRD directive, for our listeners who are not familiar, the European Union issued the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which asks companies to report their carbon emissions, Scope 1 and Scope 2. And I believe that CSRD is a great positive force in shaping this buy-in from the leadership, because now there's a legal incentive to do that. Once we have this in place, once you have the ball rolling from the top, we can start looking into data architecture, data plumbing, as well as feeding these numbers back into the decision chain, right, for reliable engineering decisions. However, that's a much longer process. And I think these downstream processes involve a lot of trade-offs, they involve continuous steering, they involve a lot of sign-offs as the organization grows, as it progresses, as it branches out. And over the course of this process, the only thing that is truly the same is the leadership buy-in. What do you think about that, Valeria?
I think I'm actually on the same page. I think that a lot of times what I've seen also as part of my job as a consultant is that usually if like sustainability is not something that is interesting for the leadership people or the people that actually make decisions, it becomes very, very difficult to actually open a discussion about this. Exactly. Even though, as we know, we can see sustainability not just as carbon emissions. We can see sustainability as optimization, resource usage, technical debt. Like sustainability, I always think about sustainability as an umbrella term that actually has so many different things below it. But yeah, I agree that a lot is in the hands of leadership and in the hands of people that actually manage the teams, manage, some parts of a company. And we've discussed about this before so many times. It's also a matter of time. Like sustainability is not already part of the discussion since the starting point. Sustainability is seen in some ways, and for some companies and in some markets, is still seen just like writing documentation. Like writing documentation is the last point that you have to do as a developer. It's not the right thing to work. I'm not saying that it's the right way to do things, but it's actually how most companies are working. And so to come back with the first question, companies and teams face difficulties because for some ways they do not have the time, they do not have enough resources, and it's actually a broader discussion that we have to make. And also another thing, it's something that I usually reflect on, is that we have right now we have so many tools, so many open source tools. And some of them are great, are super useful, and so on. But sometimes I also see that some tools remain with the sustainability label. And because of that, they are seen as not as useful as they could be. So they are not seen as tools that can actually help you, making your deployment faster, for example. They are just seen as, oh yeah, that is related to sustainability, but we do not take care of sustainability. We do not care about the environment. We do not care about that and that. And so, I don't know, sometimes I ask myself, should we find another name for open source tools that are actually related to sustainability? So they are, they become a bit more used and a bit more famous.
I think that's a great idea. I would love to know if we can do that, but I don't know how.
Yeah, we will definitely talk about this again because we have many tools related to environmental sustainability. We have a lot to take care in our plates. Yes, I think that we can go to the next topic of today.
Absolutely. So the next topic I want to discuss with our audience is, it's a very interesting article that came out in this magazine called Computer Weekly, and it describes how the cloud sustainability competition space is heating up. The interesting part about cloud sustainability is you have distinct vendors, right? You have the three big players in the town, and all the players report sustainability data. But the hard part is they don't report the same metrics. So you don't know how to compare between vendor A and vendor B. And that's what makes it challenging. Although AI deployment, AI use, massive token use is changing the competitive landscape for cloud sustainability, the buyers should now demand comparable workload level emissions data in the RFPs. Unfortunately, that is something that is missing from the current landscape, and the current platforms are quite vague about it. Without consistent reporting, it's really hard to choose the lower impact option or to even measure if our improvements are real, right? So this pushes sustainability from nice to have marketing into procurement power. If our customers require transparency, providers will respond. And that is a great point, I think, that this article mentions. What do you think, Valeria?
Definitely. I have discussions about these topics so many times during conferences. Some people ask me, yeah, but this is environment, sustainability, measuring, and so on. It's super interesting, super important. But people think that they cannot do anything. But the first thing that you can do is actually asking for explanations. For example, if you choose a specific provider and they are not as transparent as you would like them to be, ask them. I've chosen you because I think that you have, this type of characteristic and blah, blah, blah. But I also want to know, for example, something about how you manage your emissions, what type of energy your data centers use, and so on. And if we as individuals think that our individual questions cannot make a difference, this is actually a problem. Because we as consumers, we have the power to ask questions and to redirect the offers and how providers are working.
I completely agree with that. The consumers have the final power. That is exactly right. But I'm also very curious, Valeria, what do you think about the community impact that these data centers have? I think you have some great points on that.
Yeah, you know me well. I think that at this point, at this episode, I don't know how many episodes we've recorded, but yeah, I'm on the social part. And actually, it's one of the things that I actually very appreciated of the article. So I really recommend everyone who's listening or is watching this episode, read all the article, and especially this one from Computer Weekly. Also because there are, in the content, there are so many external links related to how data centers are changing things like power usage effectiveness, water usage effectiveness, and all those super interesting information. But coming back to the social aspect, in the article was mentioned a specific part that was related to the importance of also being transparent of the impacts that, for example, building a data center in some regions impact local communities. Because I think that this is one of the topics that is not talked about enough.
Yep.
Every time that we see an article related to, a new data center is being built, and so on, I think that many of us cannot relate to looking out their windows and seeing some buildings like that being built, for example. Yep. But there are people that are actually living those situations so often, especially in the last 3 or 4 years, since the AI boom and so on. And one of the things is that in these contracts that companies are writing and that are signing, there should also be something related to the social aspects, to the social impact that those buildings, and the fact that those buildings are being built in those specific regions, the impact that these action will have to the local communities. And so, for example, talking about the impacts, water consumption, for example. So communities that at some point will have to face water shortages, for example, or blackouts and so on. This is actually a problem. These issues exist, even if we do not see them. Some people are living those situations. And so, this is one of the topics that I'm very passionate about. What do you think, Adi?
I think that's extremely important. And this is the community part that is not discussed, or, well, let's say it's kept hush-hush, right? But the first step to improving things is to talk about them and then see where we can go from that.
Yeah, definitely. Talking about topics, sharing about them. We've talked about this so many times. It would be better to talk about a topic even if we have bad news or bad numbers to share, rather than not talking about them.
Exactly.
Because if we share information, if we share thoughts, if we share, things that we are scared of, we can work in order to make things better. But if we do not talk about things that are not that good, or things as you were saying, if we keep things hush-hush, things will never change.
I completely agree.
So the only thing that we can, I think that we can hope for, is that work from non-profit associations, and from people that are actually working in order to make standards for this type of situation. We can only hope that the discussion is kept open rather than being closed. And so, yeah. And also, in the article, there were so many numbers, so much data. But what do you think, like talking about contracts or like minimum things that we as individuals or that we as, I don't know, people from nonprofit associations that are working on standards and so on, what would be the minimum demand that we could ask to providers and to people that are actually keeping, like building data centers and support the AI explosion? And so, as usual, the bigger the better. But we know that the bigger the better is not something that we can talk about when we talk about sustainability.
Right. So I think that's a great question. And I would like to raise some points from the article itself. The article makes great points in this direction. First of all, it recommends that customers need to stop treating cloud sustainability as a secondary afterthought, right? So treat sustainability and treat the emissions data as part of the core architecture, as part of the core RFP. And that also means that they ask the vendors to disclose market-based and location-based emissions data reported by service, region, product, project, and month, and also increase the visibility into embodied carbon, AI-specific energy use, and the water intensity. Now, this is, let's say, hard to get. These kind of values are almost always hidden behind curtains, and that is the data that can significantly help change sustainability and procurement decisions. The second point that the article raises is also very interesting. It basically says that do not rely exclusively on the dashboards that these providers supply for the data. There are third-party comparison tools that exist only because enterprises need normalization across the cloud, not just better single provider views. And these third-party comparison tools can be quite helpful in this direction. And finally, and I think this is the most important point, to write the sustainability requirements directly into cloud and AI RFPs, rather than leave them as a side conversation that is after the contract is signed, okay? It's very important that we raise this before putting ink on the paper. What do you think about that, Valeria?
Definitely. Definitely. This should be the base of the discussion, the base of a contract, and not something that is at the end of the list of, yes, it's crazy that we've come to this point, and that, in general, I don't know, the fact that talking about topics like this is something that is not the base of discussion. I don't know how to say in a different way. I think that these should be the first points that should be addressed when writing contracts. So as well as the social part, and also when you were listing your favorite points of the article, the second point actually reminded me when I don't remember if it was Google or who from the big tech elite, but one of them, when they shared one of the reports on AI usage, AI emissions, and so on, they specifically said that the method that they used was an internal method. So they were basically auditing themselves. And this is crazy. It's crazy that this happens. So I don't we've learned that in school. Like, you cannot go to school and say, yeah, I studied at home, so I my score is like 90 out of 100. It's not like that. There are other people that are asking you questions and that are deciding your level of skill, your level of preparation for a specific topic. So why should we not apply the same method to big tech, work, energy provider, data center, people? And I don't know. This reminded me of school years, and I think that it's a great metaphor. I think I did a great metaphor for this.
That is a great example. But all right, that was a fascinating discussion. Now let's move on to the third topic. The third topic is
Yes.
It's by the Green Web Foundation. The Green Web Foundation does excellent work in the area of sustainability, and they've introduced AI model cards in carbon.txt. Valeria, can you please tell our viewers what is the carbon.txt?
Oh, yes. I was looking forward to describing carbon.txt. So, as we like to talk about transparency, carbon.txt is also one of the tools that makes transparency part of its characteristic. Carbon.txt is an open source project developed by the Green Web Foundation some years ago. I think the first version. And this project aims to share sustainability information as easy as possible to be discoverable and to be used. In fact, the carbon.txt is actually a TXT file, so is super readable even by non-sustainability advocates, non-sustainability professionals. So in some ways, there are some parallelisms that we can make between the impact framework and the carbon.txt. But imagine that carbon.txt is basically a TXT file that describes things related to sustainability. And so what they did and what we are talking about in this last news for the day is the fact that the newest version of the carbon.txt project now also has they name them AI model cards. So if we before wanted to describe our software, our website, and all the things that are related to sustainability, related to them, now we also have them about AI. If I remember correctly,
Exactly right.
but you will have, yes, but you will have the article in the description. For the AI model cards, they used the Hugging Face tools, and they try to use as many open source information that they could find in order to create basically a very big directory of models ordered by emissions and what phase of the model they had the numbers for, some notes and some super interesting and useful information that you can look for when, for example, trying to decide which model you want to use for your project or for...
Exactly right. The practical value of this is standardization. The carbon.txt and an AI sustainability directory makes disclosures easier to publish, easier to discover, and easier to compare. It also raises a very useful question. Training impact is important, but for many teams, inference dominates the day-to-day emissions, so disclosures need to be more complete over time. Valeria, if your org published an AI model card tomorrow, what would you include first? Would you include training footprint, inference efficiency, energy assumptions, or something else?
That's such a great question. So, I think that I won't include as the first thing, I won't include just numbers. I think that I would include technical specifications that can also be applied to other models, because we know that numbers are related to specific situations. We have to make so many assumptions, and also people in general, we as humans, whenever we see a number, we get attached to them. And so what I would like to do is like not sharing just numbers, but sharing the basis of how we've worked for that model and how we would like for people to use that. Because we know that, for example, we see so many times that developers, technicians, and so on sometimes use models that like are much bigger models that they than the models that they would actually need, for example. And so I would add instructions, like some kind of a guide for people that will use my model. And then maybe like on a second phase, I will maybe share some numbers, but I would be sure to also add the processes that we followed in order to have those numbers. Because
That is exactly right.
because I think that numbers, if we don't have enough context, are just numbers. They do not help us to make better decisions. And so, yeah. But I think that I want to ask you the same question. What would you add for the information?
Well, first of all, I think you raise a great point that a number without context is just a number, right? So we need to add context around that number to help make a decision. Now, I believe the AI model card and carbon.txt is a great idea, and all of the metrics that we saw are super important, right? But the hard part is how we can enable a non-expert to make the decision in a convenient and reliable way. Exactly what you were saying, right? The expert understands what is the number, what does it mean, and how to use it. But how can we improve the usability of the number without putting people through 5 years of education and a degree? So the AI model card is a great first step in the right direction, but I want to envision a future in which we have an easy rating system for models. Kind of like, have you seen those energy efficiency ratings on electrical devices? Right.
Yes.
So that would be a great idea because that would enable people to quickly see how this particular model is going to impact their energy efficiency. And that would enable easy discovery, that would enable useful and relevant comparison, and also help inform selection for the end consumers. What do you think about this kind of idea where we have energy efficiency ratings for models?
I think it would be a great idea because we would have like some kind of a score that is actually understandable for everyone.
Exactly.
And at the same time, we would have, further information for all those people that have enough technical background to understand those information as well. But I completely agree, and I hope that someone who's, who has the power to raise this idea to bring that to, a bigger table than the ones that we are using right now to have this discussion. But I hope that in the future, and with AI, like future is super fast. So this will be like in 3 months from now, for example. But I hope that we will have a rating system for model. We will definitely be talking about this again.
That will be great. And now let's get to the event.
Yes. So as usual, we have to wrap up the episodes with a quick notice. Today, I don't have a super long list of events. We have just one, but it's not just a event. It's the event, or at least a series of events. We are talking about Green I/O conferences in 2026. There's a call for speakers open for all the Green I/O conferences that are happening after this month. And so you will find, as usual, in the notes, the form that leads you to the call for speakers. I really, really recommend you to go to one of the Green I/O conferences. It's one of my dreams of 2026, so I hope to, I don't know, Adi, are you planning on going on one of the Green I/O conferences this year? Because we could have an episode there.
Yep,
like
I would love to
having
get a
a
Green I/O
coffee.
sometime. Yeah, that will be great. However, I need to take leave from my work. Well, I see Green I/O happening from May 13 to 14 in New York. How about you take a flight to New York? Or that's a bit far away though.
That's a bit far away from me. I think that I would stick to Europe for now. So I will, I don't know, maybe in autumn later this year. So maybe
That will be
London
great.
or Paris. Yeah. So please, people, if you're listening to this episode or are watching this episode, send an idea. Write and submit an idea in the call for speakers for Green I/O conferences. That's it, I think, for this week's episode of The Week in Green Software, or as we like to call it, TWiGS. We talked about so many interesting things, and I hope you found this episode interesting. We talked about SCI, we talked about the impact framework, we talked about AI as usual, we talked about carbon, AI models, AI ideas, AI energy labels, hopefully. And Hadi, I would really, really like to thank you for joining me for this episode today.
Thank you for hosting, Valeria. It was a great episode and I really enjoyed it.
So, as a final reminder, all the resources for this episode are in the show description below, as well as the links and so on. You can also visit podcast.greensoftware.foundation to listen to more episodes of Environment Variables and of TWiGS. And I think that we will see you all in the next episode, and have a great rest of the day, everyone.
See you soon. Have a great day. Bye.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. Just a reminder to follow Environment Variables on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please do leave a rating and review if you like what we're doing. It helps other people discover the show. And of course, we'd love to have more listeners. To find out more about the Green Software Foundation, please visit greensoftware.foundation. That's greensoftware.foundation in any browser. Thanks again, and see you in the next episode.